you and I are kind of similar. You may even be more good-hearted than me. I feel like you, well.
But in our longing hearts, we're all the same.
Mutual respect and
Yes.
a boundary might have been crossed that you, right?
That's
so
correct.
just an example
That's
of,
a good example.
it is a great example. I appreciate that for
Yes.
giving me the example to even work with.
Let's be the change we want to see.
I've never seen differences negative. I've always been attracted to and intrigued by it. But we're looking for, how are we similar? How are we the same? How can we all just get along?
We are links in a chain.
What's up, everyone? Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. This is Working It Out Across Generations. I'm one of your hosts, Justin.
And I am the other host, Dr. Lynne.
Awesome. Here we talk all things conflict, big and small, how they reinforce how we move as a society. And we also, being that we have a conflict resolution background in our professional lives, try to give some tips, some ideas out there for reconciliation for future endeavors in which you'll find yourself in, conflicting endeavors, of course. Really, really cool topic today. I'm kind of surprised we haven't gotten to this sooner.
Really?
But I mean, I think it's always timely. So as long as it gets addressed and we do give our platform this this topic, then I think that we're doing it justice overall. I think it's something that we've all seen before. Who's the tougher generation? Here, we're all about literally giving intergenerational perspectives to these conflicts and conflicting things that we've got to deal with every day, regardless of age, background, whatever it is. And so I think this is going to be a really, really interesting one. And I'll toss it over to Dr. Lynne to start bringing us into this conversation.
Yeah, I think for me, I love the topic, right? The topic is, who is the tougher generation? And it comes out of just hearing, to be honest, generations complaining about other generations. And you see articles on it all the time. I was just reading something yesterday, and then, Gen X this, and millennials this, boomers this, and it doesn't always seem to be that people in different generations are really appreciating what other generations are going through and the strengths that they bring. I guess it's normal that people think that, well, they're the better, or things were, they're the tougher, right, generation. We went through all of these things. We didn't have this, that old joke, had to walk however miles, 25 miles to school. And, oh, well, we had to walk 50 miles with, and we had holes in our shoes. And then the other person says, oh, you had shoes, like, oh, we're so much tougher. And I thought, let's take this on, because we are different generations, not just mother and son, but the generational aspects of two adults who are really in business together, working together and doing this television show together. We must have some kind of perspective on this. I know that I do, and I'm sure that you do. So I thought, let's bring it forward. And I know you jumped right on it, like, yep, as you just said, it is timely, and we should have done it earlier, but here we are. Ring the bell, ding, ding. Who's the tougher generation? So for me, I think I'm not a great one for this, because I can see a lot in every generation. I really can. But I will say that I think that circumstances are different for each generation. And so when you talk about tough, the first thing I'd like to tackle is, what's our definition of tough? I think that it comes from this place of only one real definition, right? And a lot of times it has to do with physicality, right? That you're this tough person. But then the other thing I hear is just how, this kind of toughness to grind. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm always hearing about this grinding culture and this no sleep, team no sleep, and just really getting it all done. And come from the generation of, super women and doing all of those things, right? I think are what drives people to think, in particular my generation, like, what, we're so tough and we had things rougher, and or we had things better, but they made us tougher in different ways. And that I hear a lot about generations behind me, millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zs, that there's no real toughness, that they all want things handed to them. They want to be millionaires overnight and without having worked for it, or they really can't, they complain about everything. And we complains about nothing, right? Oh, but here's the thing. We really weren't allowed to complain. That's the piece for me. I think that people in my generation, we kind of get amnesia to the things that were different, right? And that weren't necessarily the greatest about our generation, right? So people think what made you tougher was, getting your behind whipped. And that one, I think we've maybe talked about spanking before, but this is even different. Like that one, I can't, I'm not ever going to be able to go there with you and say that that's what made us tougher. I think that that's what many of us think made us tougher. And many of us think that the generations behind us, particularly millennials on down, really need a good butt whooping because they're just doing all of these different kinds of things. I understand the urge, but I don't think that made us tougher. I actually think that did not leave room for the other side of the definition of tough, which for me is emotional and mental toughness. Being able to talk about things that are hurting you, whatever those things are, I think is a part of toughness. And I'm going to say that if you don't think so, this is my belief. If you don't think so, then why isn't everybody doing it? Why do people find it so hard to be vulnerable? Why do people find it so hard to say, I'm anxious about something, or I went through a depression, or I'm going through a, why do you find it so hard to talk about feelings? If you're that tough, then it shouldn't be hard, but that's not our definition. And so for me, I want us to widen the definition first.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think a lot of good stuff said. And as far as my general thoughts on this topic, I think that, right, it does come up a lot because people are complaining about other generations and, the things that make them who they are, but, not necessarily in a celebratory or even just like acknowledgement way. It's really in a, shooting down, like, not necessarily, they don't deserve a seat at the table, but kind of like, what can this generation with this factor to them really offer to, I guess, society, right? And I think that my thing is that, especially when it comes to tough, right? Like, I think everyone's tough. I think if you've got to, be here breathing, in this life, right? Like, you've got some toughness to you because life is going to throw a whole lot at you, any one person, and there's no bounds for that, right? Like, so I just think it's one of those things where, right, like redefining, not even redefining, just like, I guess, kind of reinforcing what that word tough means for you. Because again, we really are people that really appreciate difference and appreciate things that we don't have or that we maybe don't see, right? So I know for me, while there's truth to, I think, things that I've heard of my generation, Gen X, Gen Z, there's truth to different, things that make up the generations. However, I think that in the sense of around the way we talk about this topic, we're not necessarily approaching it in a, well, how do we make this work kind of way. Right. I think that there's a lot more of just like, this shouldn't even be happening kind of thing, especially when it comes to, younger people of younger generations being bosses or authority to, those who are older, like in a company, right? And anything like that. Like, that's definitely a shift and an adjustment, right? Especially with that lived experience, that lived expertise, which, you know, everyone really does take seriously. However, it's not just like one of those things you should just like go report and leave it at that. It should be like, you know, how do we game plan moving forward with this new dynamic for the betterment of this person in this new position, me feeling like I'm actually, you know, still contributing, whatever it is, and then the overall goal being met, right? So I don't really hear a whole lot of connotation around this conversation in that format, and I think that's why it's good that we're talking about it and that we bring this to our platform, because, you know, we really are about not just like necessarily middle ground, but just acknowledgement and holding of both and or other.
Yeah.
So I think generationally speaking, you know, so Gen Z here, fully owning that. I think there's a lot of truth to, you know, the stuff that I've heard about our generation, right? We're stubborn. There is a sense of, you know, we do want certain things just kind of handed to us, I guess, right? And I can see how that's difficult and tough to work with in any capacity. And again, I think there's just so much that we bring to the table. There's so much that people can learn from us as a generation itself, in just Gen Z itself. And I think that, again, I want to see more talk around this topic being about like, how do we understand each other better? How do we work with each other better? How do we, maybe if not celebrate those differences, just try to see some positive in that, right? And be willing to put that back out into the world, right? I don't really hear I think like collective positive talk in the masses about Gen Z or like any of the generations. I think that, you know, people kind of select their few that they've been exposed to in their life to say like, you know, hey, well, at least I've been exposed to or open to at one point, right? But this generation is still whatever and this and that, and I just can't work with them and stuff like that. So I think that it's really just about being able to really invite all of what makes people who they are to the table, not just like what they can do for you, what they can provide for you. And I think that we as a generation are very much about, you know, identifying what those things are, right? Deeper than just what you can provide.
Well, what do you think in society, in your lives, even if in your own upbringing with your dad and I, is responsible for you all seemingly wanting things just handed to you?
I think, at least with a lot of the Gen Zers that I know, and especially for me, there are certain elements of life that I would like just given to me. Like, duh, I think anyone would. And I think you're a liar if you say you don't. Like, let's not just leave that to Gen Zers, right? I think that's a human thing to naturally want things from life. But I think that what I've heard more of is that we want the responsibility to make some of these really big and influential choices for all of us, considering that we're thinking of all of us. I can't speak to everyone like older than me and stuff, right? But we can kind of sniff out like BS, to be completely frank. We can sniff out who's really got a plan that's like for everyone, like, and who's thinking of everyone. So I think when it comes to, you know, even if it's like in government, you know, there's a lot of young people I know who actually like love being in government and want to pursue a career in that in whatever fashion they can. So I think it's more about the responsibility, because we genuinely feel like with all of the advancements that we've made in the world since, you know, you were my age, right? Even let's just go there. There's still so much that like we have to work on, but so much that we've just like, I guess, not nurtured as like a problem. Like so much stuff that we've allowed to just become culture that I think for us, we're just like, you know, all right, well, if you guys had all this time in the world on this planet and this is where we're at, and we all can agree that there's so much more work to do across generations as a society. I think for us, it's more like, give us the reins and we'll show you in the next 50 years that it could look just a bit more different from what you guys left for us.
Yeah.
So I think it's really more about taking on the responsibility of, you know, doing it better than our parents. I think that's really what, from what I've heard.
And earlier,
yes,
right?
earlier, which I think is toxic.
Uh-huh.
You know, but definitely better. I think that's our goal, right? And I think that's, from what I've heard, any parent or elder's goal, right? To pass it on so that the next generation can do better, be better, and I think we just really take that seriously. So it doesn't come out always all the time in the right ways, but I think we do take pride in that responsibility.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to tell you, this is done in real time, right? We don't rehearse or anything. So while Justin was talking, I was writing down all the things from my generation growing up that bump up against the things that you were saying, as a way to really talk about why there can be friction between the generations. So I can tell you the things that were, you always heard them said, you talked about. If I talked with my friends, their parents, that's one thing I got to say. There was like no originality. I used to say, do parents go to the same school? Because you'll all say the same thing in regards to every single situation. Like with our friends, there was never any originality. So it's do things our way, right? My way or the highway was a huge saying when I was growing up. And it not only was at home, but you would hear it at work too. Those in authority, right? My way or the highway, tough it out. That was huge. Even if you had a headache, and I'm not saying that you need to lie down and call in sick because you have a headache, but I am saying that sometimes that's really the priority, to take care of that, right? And just any little thing, tough it out. You really had to be in dire straits for an adult to have pity on you. And you definitely better not be trying to get out of going to school or going to work. There's like nothing. You need to be on your way to surgery, to major surgery, either one of those things. Don't complain, right? Because nobody wants to hear it anyway. And it's not going to get you anywhere. And it just means that you're weak. It means you can't tough it out. Work hard for it. And I can see that bumping up against. I'm not saying that other generations don't work hard, but the way that we were taught, like I just gave you some things that leading up to the working hard for it meant there's no excuses. There's nothing that you can do or say that is going to exempt you from behaving in this way. So when you want a promotion and you just been there, it's going to rub up against, I'm a boomer. I should have said that in the beginning. It's going to rub up hard. I guess that because you just got here. That's another thing. You just got here and you looking for how to move up. That definitely my generation. Be patient. Wait your turn. Your time will come. All of those things we were all told. Right? Told the line. Definitely told the line. Don't. And y'all are good for, pushing back. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just, because actually I think I would have loved to have pushed back more myself, but those who push back usually got left back, so it definitely wasn't something in my generation that was promoted. Oh, you haven't lived long enough. Gosh, I got tired of hearing that. To be complaining about this, or to be talking about this, or to be telling me anything, all of that, you haven't lived long enough. So I'm never going to live longer than you, who's already older than me. So I'm not sure how I'm ever going to really get anywhere, right? If I haven't lived long enough, because you're always going to be able to say that to me because you're older. But you used to hear that all the time. You can do without. It makes you stronger. So yes, I can remember when you all were growing up, all of these things that, this toy, that toy, you need a phone at 10, you need, y'all didn't get it at 10, but all of those things. So that definitely bumps up against do without. I got a phone in my room. When I came home from college, I stayed, I stayed with my parents for about a year and a half, right? That's when I got a phone in my room. Otherwise, it was the kitchen phone. And everything went through that. So think about that mentality, right? That says, oh, I need it now, or I want this. My friends have this. Oh my goodness, my friends thing never went anywhere. If your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off too? That was huge as well. So there's a lot of things that were really implanted into us in the boomer generation, that when we hear Gen Z or Gen X talk, right, then it bumps up against that. And we're like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, but all of that kicks in, and we're going to, rather than have the room and the space to say, let me grow and change and listen, we're going to, too many of us are pushing back, saying, nope, if it was good enough for me, it's going to be good enough for you. And then the whole piece of, we've been living here longer, so we know more. I'm not saying we don't know more, but I'm saying that we don't know more in every category. All of us boomers, right? Who are you learning computers from? Who are you learning social media from? And if you think those two things aren't important, they most certainly are. I know social media may not be important to a lot of people, but for me as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur, I have to know about social media because it's a way to get my stuff out there. So, I can hear and understand how things that are different in each generation are really bumping up against things that have been tried and true, or at least we were told they were tried and true, or they worked for us, or it was just the way things are done. That's another one that I hear all the time. This is just the way it's done. And then I hear, Gen Z and Gen X, like, but why? I mean, why are we? Because times change. Can't we change with them? So I don't know. I just wanted to throw that in because as you were speaking, all of these things are coming to me like, yep, this is why we're clashing, because we've just been taught different things in different ways. And if as parents, we've learned how to kind of move forward and do it differently, it doesn't mean that it still doesn't bump up against some things. I'm sure you all were told no originally to something you asked for, not because we really thought about it, that it should be no, but because we were told no, right?
And that's ridiculous. Like, that's so ridiculous and so real. But think about like the people who are teachers. Think about like administrative staff at schools, right? Like who just like use that power for no real nurturing of, the betterment of the next up, right? Like that's, and sadly, I've been exposed to more teachers like that and schools like that, where like, it's almost like a corporate company, the way that, it's tough to climb the ranks of whatever it is, right? And the ranks isn't even just like graduating. It's like, there's systems that be within every community. We know that. So that's just an example, but I think.
But you haven't encountered it in work too much because you have a great boss.
Anyway, I mean, great plug, I guess. But anyway, so yeah, haven't encountered it too much at work, but I know one day will come. So let's get into why younger generations are tough.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Gen Z. Why y'all are tough?
Yeah, let's just start this off. I think that number one, our adaptability and our resilience. Okay. I want to be very clear. COVID and living through COVID, I think really doesn't get we don't get the credit we really deserve for that. I really don't think we do. Okay. Not that there's awards to be given for it. It's just it was a very tough time. Really think about, just your everyday routine and your everyday life being shifted into a complete 180, right? And I think that for anyone that's tough, but for a young person in school, seeing their friends, in extracurriculars, whatever it is, like they need that structure. And I think that having taken that away for even just quite some time really was, a difficult thing to adapt to, just off adaptation alone. The resilience piece, I think, comes from the fact that, lives were lost during that time, right? Everyone was grieving someone or something during that time. So I'm just thinking about, really as a young person who's way more of a sponge, and their brains are way more sponge-like to the world, to have to deal with even like a graduation being canceled, funerals not being able to be held, people in hospitals that you can't visit, right? Of all generations, but I'm really focusing on the younger ones right now. I think that for a young mind, that's very difficult to have to take in just from a data standpoint, let alone making the connection somehow, some way that this is a part of life, right? Like to the deepest extent, past like conspiracies and like whatever. It's really just like a messed up part of life that we have to deal with. And I think that, we do, we are emotional and we are, whatever, right? And in the same breath, I would say for this reason, we're incredibly tough. That was a very, very tough time for everyone. I can only speak for me too. Very, very tough time for me. And yet just very glad to still be here. And I know so many other people my age who would say the same thing, just off of COVID alone.
Because I appreciate you bringing that up. I didn't even think about that, and there was nothing that you could do about it.
No.
It wasn't. I mean, people had to shelter in.
Yeah.
People had
You had to.
Like, it was a crisis time, and we're in New York, so it was just insane here. There's no question about it. And it was, and all of you, whatever else, I'll speak, just from our perspective, it was a difficult time without COVID in our family, right? At that point in our lives. And I'm sure in other people's lives, they had other things besides COVID going on too, that were already difficult that they had to deal with. And then to put this on top of it. And to be honest, we as a generation and those under me who were parents had we didn't have this before. We had no precedent for this. Like, this hadn't happened in our lives. So while we could be strong, be tough or whatever, we really couldn't lead you all, right? Because we had never experienced something like this. Not saying we hadn't experienced crisis, but this was a whole nother thing. And so, yes, and for you all to come out of that, and yes, the resilience and those developmental pieces, right? Those things that you get to celebrate, those people who could not do graduations, or as you said, those people who could not attend a funeral to really say goodbye to loved ones. There were things that were missed that, and again, our generation couldn't lead in that. We could say to you, I know it's bad, it's, so sorry, but we really couldn't help you through that in a way of familiarity. I've been through this. You'll get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of generational clashes, at least in my experience, started to really show up.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really great point. Thank you for that. Next, our emphasis on mental health support. Now, I don't know exactly how the conversation around mental health went when you were coming up, but it sounds like it was like, just so out of left field, and shut up
and get
over it. Leave me alone with all that.
Right. Leave me
alone with all that. Like, and I want to be very clear that sadly, that way of thinking is the reason that a lot of people are not here to this day. And not from just life taking its course, them taking actions into their own hands.
Right.
And I think that for me, that's something, especially just around the way that we talk to each other, right? Like the tough it out, right? We've talked about using shame as a motivator, right? So using name calling as a motivator to get someone to do something and whatever it is. And I just want to be very clear that some of those phrases, some of that that way of thinking, even just that tone
Mhm.
in what you're saying, sadly can be the thing that could send someone over the edge, right? It could be the amplifier for whatever it is in their minds they're already feeding themselves that's already not helpful.
Mhm.
And so I just think that, you know, we are willing to have those tough conversations. We're willing to put ourselves in the line of fire of those tough conversations. We're willing to get it wrong in those conversations if it means we get more time with the people that are in our lives and more time with them feeling good in their own body, in their own living, in their own chapters. You know, and I think that that's something that we take real pride in, and real maybe not joy, but pride. I'll leave it in pride. We just take real pride in making sure that that's a conversation that people know that they are allowed to have and safe to have, you know, when you think about that foundational container in which you're going to have it. So I think that that's something that, you know, really at the end of the day, will save a life before it takes one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm gonna throw this one up. Yep. Mike. Hey Mike. Good to have you here. You agree. Yeah. Yeah. Trying to get an understanding. Absolutely. It is not it's not easy to understand when it is not you, right? When it's not something that you're used to growing up with. But I would say that um it really is I'm sorry, you're gonna have to throw it back up for me. Thank you. Mental health support. Yes.
stop touching stuff, please. Leave that for us.
I'm talking
You
about.
don't need to be touching stuff at all.
I'm so happy to have you.
At all. You don't need to be touching stuff.
All right. So the emphasis on mental health support. Yeah, there is absolutely no. The most I heard growing up was that somebody had a nervous breakdown. I didn't know what that meant. I don't know, you know, how your nerves have a break. I didn't know that was the most. And people were very hush hush if somebody was going through something. And there was a lot of shame cast in it. And I think that there's definitely shame being casted in it today. But I would say that you all, maybe it was millennials, are responsible for things like a mental companies and, you know, instituting mental health days, which I think absolutely, because there were days I know that there may not have been a lot of days, but there were days where it's just like, I just don't know how I'm doing this, right? I can remember just even after my mom died, which you get a certain amount of days, you know, based on what? Based on what people think you should, you know, how much time you think you should be grieving, and then you got to get yourself back to work. I understand companies have to run, but in any case, but I can remember days just sitting at my desk just weeping because it was just a tough day. So and that has to do with mental health. So I think I love that you all have brought that to the forefront and are saying it's important. We need to do this. We need to have these, and also we need to be having the conversations, talking about this, because we are losing people, and it doesn't make you weak because that's a part of who we are. Right? Our mental, emotional health is part of who we are, and it's been ignored for so long. And particularly, I can tell you my generation, but I'm going to say, especially if you were a man, I do not know how so many men made it, except that I will say there was a tremendous amount of alcoholism in my generation. I'll say it in my family too.
It's a lot in mine.
More women.
So,
yeah. I mean, I think that's people have
don't be confused by
for a long time.
Yeah, don't be confused by the frat, you know, culture and stuff. It's really just, you know, I'd say alcoholism.
Yeah, absolutely.
So absolutely. And then last, I think we have really great social and environmental consciousness. So I think for me, this just means that we're just very in tune with where we are, why we're there, what we're there to really get out of that place, how certain environments are landing for us and feeding us, right? I think that this has everything to do with more of just those interpersonal check-ins like we've talked about in other episodes, right? Of, you know, where am I going? Where do I feel fed? Who do I feel fed around, right? All of these different things, and really just reinforcing that that, like I said, check in with yourself, because we're always growing, we're always changing, and we're always, looking for that next thing to feed us. And I think that also through that, we need to do some kind of like, I don't know what the word is. It's not like recycling, but like kind of just like making way for new things, new ways of being, new ways of thinking, and how the external and exterior plays a role in all of that. Because we just are very big as a generation on, I think, roles, like being like staying in your lane, and certain lanes playing certain parts for everything to work out to a certain goal, right? And so I think part of that is, just, what's really the culture of where I'm at, and how does this land for me, and really making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable on our values, on our beliefs, and all of those things. So I think that's just what it means for me.
Well, I think you all have you have social media, which lets you know that, hey, there's so many things out there. Listen, I knew about the Black experience because I lived the Black experience. I didn't know about a whole lot of other experiences because we didn't have that. I've said in other shows, we had 3 channels, or yeah, I think that was it. And the television went off at midnight, and we had newspapers. We didn't have our own phones. We didn't know, unless it was something that media thought was important, which weren't a whole lot of issues, particularly issues that you see now, right? That they aren't new, a lot of them. Maybe the environmental stuff may be new, but the social causes are really not that new, if at all. But we were not exposed to that. So you all have that exposure. You can learn in an instant about something that's going on somewhere else in the world, and not only in an instant learn about it, but be involved, get involved.
Yeah, really, right? Put yourself on the feet to the ground.
We did not have that. So I do say that is, and to be able to take all of that in, right, and want to do something and actually do something, I do agree that creates a real toughness, and the commitment and the dedication to stay with it and to further the cause and have more people know about it, even educating your parents. Because if everybody in my generation in particular is not necessarily on social media, and while they can rely on regular media, and there's a lot more of it in TV and all of that, they don't necessarily get a well-rounded perspective, right, of all the things that are going on there. So I would agree, but I'm going to say how we are tough, still tough. All right. We've been alive longer. Yes, I'm going to use that one.
Corny.
We've been alive
corny.
longer. But here's the deal. You could say that it's corny, but we're still here.
Yeah, true.
And in fact, the reports are that we are living longer, right? Yeah. And so, and that's creating problems for me as to, needing to be healthier, because you don't want to live longer and be unhealthy, and y'all end up having to take care of us and pay all these expenses for whatever, nursing homes and blah, 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 blah. But we've been alive longer. So we have seen a lot of things and lived through them. And depending on how close they've touched us, we've had to be tough enough, right, to work our way through those experiences. And I think that the longer you live, the tougher you're going to get.
Yeah, I'll just give that to you. Like, whatever. I could go so many different directions with that, but I'll just give it to you.
Oh, you could go another. What would you be a direction?
I just think there's so many people who've done nothing with their time here. Okay. So I don't know what y'all have. I don't know why y'all use this argument, or why y'all even just like, the next person that says this. But I think if you've been here and you're really contributing and doing stuff, and okay, cool. Right. But I sadly know a lot of adults who have done nothing with their time, and they seem to be the most opinionated on how our world is functioning. Yeah. So I just see a disconnect there. Yeah. But I definitely agree that, of the ones who really, boots to ground, doing it, like, bro, I've seen more. Mm-hmm. So I think that deserves real consideration. I will forever stand there. So
Okay. Well, I'm glad you got that out. That was good.
yeah, that was the
I
nicest way I
appreciate
could have gotten it
I
out.
know.
So I'm glad that I did too. But it's like, oh my gosh,
That was
so many
good.
people
That was
who
good.
do
And I
nothing,
agree with you. There are people,
nothing
I mean, look, they
with
try
their
to tell
time
me
here.
stuff, right?
Right.
And I'm their
Right.
peer.
And I say all the time, anyone who's older than me who can, learn from me and put themselves in the headspace to learn from me, right? I totally respect on another level. I know that's not easy.
Right.
However, not a cop out. We can learn from everyone. So yeah.
Okay. So, yep. Raised on tough it out philosophy. Listen, I know I said that it was problematic for me in many ways, but it also was not 100% problematic. It got me through quite a few tough times. I still will say that to myself. You can tough it out because I have a balance now, because I can also say to myself, I'm not going to be able to tough this one out. I'm going to need help with this in some way. And I think that that's part of the piece that is missing a lot, is that we don't reach out for help. Sometimes I think the younger generations don't always reach out for help. And I know for us, while we had that kind of it takes a village mentality, and I remember just growing up with, a lot of family and friends kind of thing, friends as family, but I don't remember a lot of, I remember a lot of secrets rather than people sharing, right? I'm having a tough time, or I just can't tough this out. I remember, and if somebody died, it was just like, be strong. That's it. That's all you got. Be strong. Not, hey, on the days you can't be strong, call me, right? I'll be the, no, you never heard that. And even now, I think that there is still that mentality amongst people in my generation. But I do think that there is something to the tough it out philosophy, as long as there's the balance, because there are times when you just really can't turn back. And you just, or if you do, you will have really missed something that is going to make you stronger, right? Or is going to be a great lesson for you. And sometimes we learn that when we tough it out and get to the other side. But again, you have to know, though, I can tough it out. And if I can't, I'm going to have to look for whatever it is, whether it's a therapist, whether it's call a phone a friend, or I need a minute. I need to breathe. I need whatever, sit this one out. Somebody needs to come in for me, whatever it is. So, yeah.
I agree. I think there's a lot of positives to this, because I think that this is also instilled in us through y'all.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a part of this that's in us. However, yeah, we are about, doing both, being able to do both.
Mm-hmm.
As both is what's going to keep you going. There's space for tough it out, and then there's space for just acknowledging this sucks. And I need a moment to just sit in the fact that this sucks.
Right.
And that's okay. And that doesn't make me weak, doesn't make me whatever. It makes me, in fact, tougher, I would say, and that we would say, to sit with yourself in those moments on that side of things too, because we know that it's all to get back out there and be tough.
Right.
So it's like that's the tougher thing to do.
Yeah,
So.
and I also think that it I got to give y'all credit, I think, for living in this world. I'm sorry. There have been times in my life, because I have been alive a long time. There have been times in my life when I have said, okay, yeah, things are bad out there, but there's some real good. And I can encourage myself by seeing that the world will get better and is getting better in so many ways. And we have a mess. This is a hot mess out here. And for you all to get up every day, when hopefully, if it works the way it's supposed to work, you got to live in this hot mess longer than we do. This is what we've left you. Then I got to say, yeah, y'all are toughing it out and in a different way. But I think you have to take care of both sides, because how we're living, the world we're living in, yeah, it's a mess. And it's not, and it's frightening at at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just won't get any better if we don't
Right.
nurture some of these messages.
Yes.
That's all it is.
That's right. And yes, I think we're tough because of the different roles that, because we've been here so long, right? We've played different roles. Everybody's not a parent, but if you are a parent if you are a parent, right? There are things that you've had to do as a parent that have really made you tough. You've got to be able to do things that you didn't think. I can think about I think about when your brother, I think he was maybe 6 or 7, and he was in the room, he was playing, and for whatever he was doing, I think it was with a broomstick, he broke a light bulb, and it was one of those big bulbs, and it shattered all around him, on top of his head, at his feet. And I remember, just like that, your dad just ran in. He had no shoes on. He ran in, scooped him up, and brought him out of there, right? And that definitely requires some toughness, because it's like, hey, I gotta respond in a second. I don't have time to think about whether it's a danger to me. My child's in danger. I have to just put myself in possible danger and don't care. I think as parents, there are times you hear about, the mother that gets the strength to lift up the truck of her child or whatever. Like, you do things as mentors. We've played that role, like really being there for people in your generation and millennials, just to be able to say, what are the things that you're going to need to do in order to get through this, to be your cheerleaders, to be the people who just talk you off the ledge sometimes. And so that creates a real sense of toughness, because it could be that we're not feeling it that day, but we know we got to give it to you. And just being an elder, being in that role, and knowing that we are going to have to be strong for you, and that it's okay, that we can do that. We have it within us to do that. And sometimes I think by strengthening you, it strengthens us too. It gives us that hope too. So I think so.
Yeah, and I think we see that in the adults that take these roles serious. We see that as younger generations. So that's great.
Yeah. So who's the tougher generation? I think Justin said it. We've all got our own toughness. I do not think that it's been watered down. I think that it may appear different depending on what generation you are in. And then I also feel like the way society raises us, influences us, it's a very competitive nature, as opposed to collaborative. Seeing, as you said, like seeing the strength in each other and seeing how we can use what we have to work together. More people my age have seen therapists because of what you all have brought to it. I remember my mom saying, nothing for therapy. And I'm going to tell you, in the Black community, they would say, we don't need therapy. We got Jesus. Just like it was no mentality for that.
Lord, that's...
or just take really just paying attention to ourselves more. We definitely were not allowed or taught to do that. And so I think that we gain things from each other's generation.
Sure.
And if we can respect that you may be dealing with a boomer who just truly believes they gotta tough it out, and just being in a friendship with, or co-worker status with, and being able to be in relationship with, you can share things that might get them thinking that that's not always how they have to be, but without disrespecting that that's where they are, right? And that comes from their age and what they've been brought up with and still believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I just see it as, thank you. And I see it as the way that we complain about certain things of generations and the masses. I just see those things as tools that we can use. So yes, I hear the whole, emotional thing about us, and it's true sometimes. It definitely is. And I think that, because of our relationship with our emotional and spiritual health, that's, helped influence some of the adults in your generation to address some of that for themselves, right? To start that journey for themselves. The same way, tough it out, right? Like, we are about therapy and support and mental health support, right? But we also are about, challenge and going out and finding that responsibility and putting things in place for that part of our health to make sure we can keep showing up in those areas, which I think is something that we got only from y'all, right? Like all the times that y'all might have been stressed, but just went out because, you didn't have technology the way it is now. So it's like, you spent time with each other, you played ball together, you did all those things, right? Ran around and like really until it was nighttime and until you had to go inside, right? Taking every minute of you that you can to appreciate those types of times. And I think that we've definitely taken that on for our own form of support and health. So again, there's so much that we can learn. We all have tools. Be open to learning from someone else, especially someone different from you. Because I'm telling you, I think that those are just some of the most fruitful relationships and dynamics and exchanges that you really get to have out of this fruitful world, as scary as it can be.
And respect each other. I hear that boom, okay, boomer, like, okay, you're old, right? So what do you know? And I really feel like sometimes you got to just say, hey, that's just who they are. And I respect that there's a lot behind that. Right. And, one of these young ones know, hey, they know a lot. And there's a lot that you all can share. And I know for our relationship, I think we try to make the best of both worlds. Like, what can you show me? What can I show you? And I think we all got to do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought this was great. I mean, again, like just getting the conversation out there in a little bit of a different way. I think, you'll see this conversation anywhere and everywhere, but I think that the way we do things, really is just acknowledging and holding space for both and all, because there's room for all of it, and there's space for all of it, and there's a role for everything. So please tune in, e360tv.com, Trajectory Channel. That's where you can find us at Working It Out Across Generations. Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV. We do have some other licenses that I have to make sure I check up on to add to that list.
And watch us on your big screen TV, not just on your computer or on your phone.
Absolutely. Facebook, Working It Out TV show. YouTube, Working It Out Across Generations.
Like, subscribe, follow, all of the above.
As we say, small is all, it all adds up. So every view, every follow, every share, every comment, we really do appreciate it. This is how we create and nurture some of these new ideas and new ways of being, right? And I think that we can all have a role in that. We all can do it together, and we have to do it together.
So you know what we say when we tune out. First of all, join us next week. It's going to be a great show. We're going to have a guest on, Dr. Linda Losell Bryant, and it's going to be another great topic. But when you go out today, you know what we say, right? Conflict is here to teach us something about ourselves. So go out and find out what it is.
Cool. I'm Justin.
And I am Dr. Lynne.
And we'll see you next week.
Yes, we will.